Hello, I'm Gordon Lang, editor of CameraLabs.com. I'd like to give you a brief video tour around the Nikon D60. Here it is, the D60. It's Nikon's latest digital SLR. It's the successor to the D40X, and in Nikon's DSLR range it sits in between the entry-level D40 and the mid-range D80 models. Now if you're familiar with the earlier D40X, you'll notice a great deal of similarities with this camera. They share the same 10.2 megapixel CCD sensor. They have the same 2.5-inch screen around the back. And they also have essentially the same body and control system. So what's new with the D60? First of all, there's proximity sensors beneath the viewfinder. These can detect when you're actually looking through the viewfinder and switch off the screen automatically. Secondly, the screen may be the same size and resolution as its predecessor, but Nikon's taken a leaf out of Sony's book and it can now rotate the information when you turn the camera to shoot in the portrait orientation. This ensures that the characters and numbers are always upright. Internally, the D60 now features optional active D-lighting. This is a feature borrowed from Nikon's higher-end DSLRs that adjusts the tonal range of your image immediately after you take it. This can be used to preserve details that would otherwise be washed out in bright highlight areas or lost in dark shadows. Here's an example that we took using the D60. This is a picture taken indoors without active D-lighting, and now exactly the same picture taken moments later with active D-lighting activated. And as you can see, it's brightened up some of those darker shadow areas in the roof. Probably the biggest physical difference between the D60 and its predecessor though is the inclusion of anti-dust facilities, which was sorely missing on the earlier D40X. Now the D60 actually has two different ways to combat dust. The first is similar to many other DSLRs these days. It can vibrate the low pass filter in front of the sensor in an attempt to shake free any foreign particles. But the D60 goes one step further. It's the first DSLR by Nikon to feature its brand new airflow system. And this exploits the air pressure within the body of a DSLR when you take the picture. As the mirror flips up and down again, air pressure within the body can now be used to force dust particles out of some air ducts that are built within the lens mount. Check out the full review at the CameraLabs.com website to see how effective those anti-dust facilities are in practice. Now there's one other big difference between the D60 and its predecessor, and that's the option to buy this camera with an optically stabilised kit lens. And I've got that lens mounted on the D60 right now. This is the new DX 18-55mm VR lens. It features built-in vibration reduction facilities that uses an element within the lens to counteract camera shake, and because it's built into the lens you can see the effect through the optical viewfinder. So when you're taking a picture with VR enabled, that image is very steady in the viewfinder, and it will actually let you handhold pictures 3 to 4 times slower than normal, so that's a very useful feature to have in practice. Right now though, let's have a closer look at some of the D60's controls. On the upper right surface of the D60 you'll find the main command dial, which as you can see offers auto, program, shutter and aperture priority modes, full manual and a selection of scene presets. Towards the front of the grip you'll find the shutter release button with the on-off switch, and beside this 2 buttons, this one on the right to activate the exposure compensation and this one on the left to adjust the active D-lighting mode. It's either on or off, and this is one of the few external changes you'll see on the D60 compared to its predecessor, the D40X. Around the back you'll find the same 2.5-inch screen as the D40X and also this same 4-way control here. And you'll notice that unlike most budget DSLRs, this control does not double up to offer direct access to things like the white balance or the sensitivity. To do that you'll need to navigate the menus, and I'll show you that in just a moment. To the side of the body you'll find the compartment for the memory card, and like most budget DSLRs these days, the D60 takes SD memory. On the underside of the body you'll find the compartment for the battery, again the same as the D40X. It's an EN-EL9 lithium-ion pack. On the other side of the body you'll find a flap behind which are the ports for the D60. At the top a TV output and at the bottom a USB port. Note that the D60 does not come with a cable to connect to your TV, that's an optional extra. Power up the Nikon D60 and after the image sensor cleaning animation you'll be presented with the main settings on the screen. Now on the left hand side you'll see there's a graphical representation of the iris within the lens, and as we increase the f number here in aperture priority mode you'll see that iris get smaller and smaller. Now that's actually a representation of what's going on in the lens right now, but if you don't like the information presented that way you can go into the menus and choose something a bit more traditional looking. Here we're switching from graphic to classic, there's a choice of 3 colours, and what you're now presented with is the shooting information in a more traditional style, somewhat like the screen on the top of a semi-pro DSLR. Now in the bottom left corner you'll see a flashing question mark. If you press the question mark button on the D60 it'll give you warnings. For example, at the moment it's saying that the lighting is poor and it recommends the flash. It's a very friendly camera. To change any settings you press the I button, and this now highlights the settings around the edges with yellow. Simply press OK when you find the one you want and go through the options. There you can change the white balance, or perhaps you want to change the ISO sensitivity. And you'll notice that as we actually change this, there's a different thumbnail next to each setting giving you an idea of how you might use that setting. Now let's go into the play mode. Here's a picture we took earlier, and by pressing the up and down buttons on the back you can cycle through pages of shooting information. You can also flash the areas that are going to be saturated highlights or show a brightness histogram. Now there's no RGB histograms as standard, but there is a sneaky way you can show them. Pop into the Retouch menu, scroll down to Filter Effects and choose the Colour Balance mode. Now choose the picture that you want, and there you can see red, green and blue histograms, along with the opportunity to actually adjust the colour balance on the picture. Now there are a lot of other filter effects on the D60, including a new starburst effect, but we're going to now have a look at the raw processing options. These allow you to select a raw file and actually process it within the camera. You can vary the image quality, you can adjust the white balance, you can play with the exposure compensation, and you can also set the optimize image parameter before then processing that file into a JPEG. Now onto the stop motion movie. This is a new feature for the D60 and it allows you to create a movie. Here you can choose the resolution and also the frame rate, a maximum of 15 frames per second there. Now the way this works is you have to actually choose which images you'd like to be part of your movie. So here we're choosing a first image and now scrolling through pictures that we took earlier until we get to the maximum of 100 pictures. Now it's important to note that each of these pictures you have to take manually. So here we were taking a picture of the sky every minute to be able to do this animation. Once you're ready, you can preview the movie. This takes about a minute to render, so we're going to fast forward to the end and show you how it looks. So here's our animation, and 100 frames at 15 frames a second will only last for 6 seconds. So already the movie's over. However, you can choose to go back into these options and choose a slower frame rate, perhaps 6 frames a second. Now let's see how that looks. Now the movie is extended to a length of 16 seconds. Now it's obviously jerkier, but it still looks pretty good. Although it is a bit of a pain taking all of those pictures manually. We had to press the button every minute here for 100 minutes to produce this sequence. The Nikon D60 may not be a world apart from its predecessor, the D40X, but it remains a good solid entry-level camera. It's also an ideal model for anyone buying their first DSLR. It's very easy to use and produces great quality photos using the automatic settings. In terms of the new features, there's nothing truly groundbreaking, but it is really nice to be able to buy the D60 with a stabilised kit lens. And we'd highly recommend that you do that. If you're going for the D60, look out for the version that comes with the 18 to 55mm VR lens. That's the one with stabilisation, and it's well worth paying the extra for it. By being so closely based on the D40X though, the D60 inherits that camera's downsides. Most notably a fairly basic 3-point autofocus system, and also an inability to autofocus with some older or third-party lenses. Now that sort of thing is unlikely to bother a first-time DSLR owner, but if you're an enthusiast on a budget, it could bother you in the future. And it's very important to weigh up these features when you're looking at buying a new DSLR, and that's what we've done in our full review at the Camera Labs website. So if you'd like to see how the D60 measures up against its closest rivals, then head on over to www.cameralabs.com. There you'll find comparisons, results, sample images taken with the D60 and the very latest pricing for this camera. So to find out if this is the ideal first DSLR for you, head on over to cameralabs.com.